Right. Hello. We are live in our very first Ask Me Anything About Analytics, where we are focusing on the move from Power BI into Fabric and everything that entails. Hello, East. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Simon. It's great to be here. I think this is the first Ask Me Anything or Ask Us Anything.
I'm more planning it as I'm going to ask you anything, and we'll just see how it goes. That seems good. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, the plan is for you guys to just pepper us with questions about all things, any concerns about any upcoming move from Power BI to Fabric, whether it's you're just making that shift, whether you got a lot of questions about what it actually means, whether it's more the licensing, P1 SKU to SKUs, what that actually means to you. The plan is to, just have a chat about it, talk through it, answer your questions, all of that good stuff. But first, East, you want to kind of set us up with a bit of context, a little bit of framing, some thoughts about how you're thinking about things, just to get the juices flowing, right?
Yeah, very much, because starting this without kind of seeding any ideas is just going to fall flat. So we've got, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of presentation. Keep it light, try to type up for discussion, and we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. Well, do you want to kick us off, set the scene? We'll go from there.
Awesome.
And while we're doing this, get your questions into the chat, and we'll line them up so we've got plenty all lined up that we can then start peppering away with.
All right. How do I add this to the screen? First technical problem.
I will do it.
Thank you.
There we
go. Okay, so we're not here to talk about like Power BI to Fabric, but more the premium to Fabric. So you might have seen over the last, few months, if not last 12 months, that Power BI Premium is just going away. It's changing into Fabric. So Power BI is evolving into Fabric, but Premium is being deprecated. It's being replaced by Fabric. So the old adage of the king is dead, long live the king is very much relevant here. Fabric is a unified platform where Power BI meets a whole host of other capabilities. So it brings in data engineering, real-time analytics, as well as AI and machine learning. So if you are on a premium capacity, you'll most likely have already been given an end date to your agreement by Microsoft. By moving to Fabric ahead of time, you can create less disruption to your operations and unlock Fabric capabilities sooner.
And I guess there's a few things in there, right? In terms of it's so when we say it's being deprecated, it's just that form of paying for it is being deprecated. I don't believe there's features and functionalities that just aren't going to exist in the new world. It's more a case of you don't pay for it the same way. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very much so. So Power BI Premium is very much, you go through the Microsoft like Office agreements, the Mac agreements, and it comes through that licensing. Whereas Fabric is more Azure licensing. It's through, it's an Azure consumable. In terms of like feature deprecation, there is no feature deprecation. In fact, you'll get many more features from Fabric, and we'll come on to that a little later. So hold your horses, Simon. So when you are kind of planning on moving over, there's a few things you need to kind of think about. The first is just reviewing where you are, what is currently being used, and your models and how they're performing. And this is first and foremost because the compute that sits behind Power BI Premium is just different from the one supporting Fabric. So by reviewing usage and model performance, you can avoid nasty surprises, which may have been masked by the premium capacity, but then made glaringly obvious inside Fabric. So an example we see quite often is where we have a poorly designed or implemented semantic model that, because it's been hidden behind the nature of the premium capacity, it doesn't really attract attention. But Fabric SKUs, they introduced the concept of bursting, smoothing, and throttling, which is new behavior. So a poor performing model could cause the capacity to burst, so incur more compute for a short period of time. But because the overall consumption of compute is smoothed over longer periods, that burst could then trigger throttling at a later date. And that's really just to ensure that overall consumption doesn't exceed fair usage. We did mention that moving to Fabric sooner than later is better if you're on premium. And Microsoft will give you grace periods, so that's the Fabric SKU that you spin up will be free of charge for that period. So you're not paying double during that migration period. We've mentioned that Fabric unlocks a lot, both beyond Power BI, but also within Power BI. So we need to think about what your teams and the wider business are prepared for these changes, as well as these new capabilities. So in terms of Fabric itself, Fabric is the entire data platform in one nice, easily accessible location. So it starts off with a unified data foundation with one lake. So this is effectively seamless data sharing across teams and workloads. You end up getting easier governance and can lead to reduced duplication of data and effort. We are moving beyond dashboards. Like Power BI is great for dashboards, semantic modeling, reporting. But because we're expanding beyond that, we can build a fully scalable data platform within Fabric. So if you don't already have something like Databricks or another cloud platform, you can do all these things within Fabric. We can unlock real-time decision making with stream analytics. So Fabric has native stream capabilities for scenarios like the Internet of Things, any operations monitoring, as well as any time series dashboarding as well, and can do all of this at speed with Kusto. We can now unlock AI and ML capabilities. We can do machine learning, feature engineering, model training using a variety of languages like Python, R, or Scala. We can also do full ETL workflows within the same environment as our BI. So kind of harking back to what our experience might have been with like the SQL Server stack, where it's all in one place. And now with the reintroduction of Fabric, we can now do all those things all within one space. We can also end up unlocking cost and platform simplification. So with it being one platform, that's just one place we need to go to for data, which still includes things like workspace security, but introduces capacity management and monitoring. But we can also start attributing costs across the different workloads as well. So we've got a lot more visibility about what happens.
The good news is there's plenty of questions coming in, so we'll have loads to talk about in a few minutes.
Excellent. Cool. So in terms of analytics, with Direct Lake, we end up being allowed to have like the best of both worlds, whether it's import or direct query. It combines the two of them. So we can get this high speed performance without any real need for refresh because it queries the underlying Delta files directly. We can unlock Gen BI with Copilot. So we can have Copilot build reports for us. We can have it assist us with our DAX. And we can also use it to query in natural language our data. So a more effective, a better Q&A than previously existed. We can take that concept of Copilot to the next step. So we can configure specific agents for specific tasks, creating a richness that previously unlocked. And that is a very new feature. So only released about 6 weeks ago, something like that. Then with Semantic Link, it is an SDK over our semantic models. So we can directly query them without the faff of having to go through the API directly within notebooks and scripts, so that there's a shared source of truth for everyone to use, whether that's analysts, engineers, or data scientists. With the likes of Fabric capacity monitoring and the Fabric unified admin monitoring, we can get richer insights into how the platform itself is performing, alongside who and how people are interacting with it. We can also get richer lineage within the platform. So the Power BI lineage that exists is like pretty basic, but then we expand that and explode that with Fabric, and we have a full lineage of what happened and where. But we can also have a full Git integration of the objects, whether that's a semantic model or a report, and we can deploy these with existing CI/CD processes that other teams might be using within the organization.
Now, while we got those up, I do want to kind of noodle around on those for a little minute, because like that would basically, for clarity, the conversation we're having this morning is there's as you're moving over and you suddenly like open the toy chest of everything that is in Fabric. It's quite intimidating, right? There's a load of other things, and it might be that you're already doing a load of that on other data platforms, other tools, and that's kind of like, it's not necessarily saying moving over you suddenly have to shift anything that way.
Right.
But the thing that isn't really touched on enough is the if you're just using Power BI Premium currently, if you've got semantic models, you've got some dashboards, and you move into Fabric, like what are extra features that sit on top of those exact things that you can start taking advantage of? And I never hear people having that conversation. It's more about, oh, you can have a look at the rest of Fabric. You can start doing other data engineering, you can do data science, you can do loads of other things in there. But that just, I'm just going to still treat it like Power BI. I'm still going to have a semantic model and some dashboards in there. And they kind of just ignore some of these extra bits. So kind of absolutely some of those pieces to kind of restate some of the things that kind of you've just ran through should be one of those big considerations, right? It should be, I've moved my semantic model over. Is import mode still the right thing to be doing? Or actually, maybe I'm using direct query currently going back on top of a SQL server. Actually, if I just actually had a separate job to dump that into one lake, would I have a better experience using direct lake and access of being able to do that? It's another import mode that people didn't really have access to previously. That's now you do not have to migrate your data into it. It's not now you're being forced to change things over. It's an extra tool in your utility belt of things that you can do, saying, oh, while you're migrating, you might want to consider it, just because it's going to have performance improvements. Well, not over import mode, but it'll have performance improvements over direct query. It might have cost implications in that you're not paying for that SQL server to have to be ramped up whenever people are trying to query it, whatever that happens to look like. Same on data agents, having people, that is again, I still hate the term generative BI, but I do use it all of the time. People's willingness, like the people's want to chat with their data, to be able to just ask a little question. It's not going to replace dashboards. It's like fun. People keep saying it's fundamentally not going to replace dashboards. But the back and forth we used to have, so to put it in context for people who've never heard of data agents, it's the whole idea of, I'm looking at a report. Maybe I've got like a traditional BI scorecard from 20, 30 years ago that's got like 10 different KPIs on there. Some of them are green, some of them are red, some of them are color coded appropriately. And, I can just glance at that big page of things and go, oh, that's where my attention should be. And I'm not going to go and ask that same question, go, what should I care about? What should I care about every single day? I'll get something big and visual to actually allow me to process it very quickly. But then why is that like that? What's the difference like that? Or what's the difference between that and the follow-up questions that either mean you need like another 40 reports sat under it for detail, or you have to have a data analyst who sits there and receives your questions, goes, writes some SQL and comes back with the answer. That is going to be really, really, really game changed by things like data agents coming in. And that can just sit on top of a semantic model. Like loads of stuff in there.
And with data agents as well, we can start embedding them into the workflows that people have. So you have this conversational ability, but you don't have to go to the Fabric to query the agent. You can go, Teams, tell me, what was the sales performance last quarter? And it will return it. So most people's workflows have shifted from being application to application to application to being, actually, I just need to be in one or two applications, and being able to embed that functionality within unlocks greater productivity In theory.
And that's, I guess, kind of my slant to it is, yes, there's considerations about migrating and things you need to be aware of and questions that people have and questions still piling up that we will start answering very soon. But there's also the question of going, for in the realms of this analytics piece, the semantic model and dashboards, what can I do with these extra tools that I couldn't do before? What can I get just to squeeze more juice out of those semantic models and actually just incrementally improve what we're doing? So there's a bunch of those stuff. It'd be good to kind of revisit if that's what people have questions about. Then feel free to put questions in and we'll dig into it. Cool. I'll let you resume your programming.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, so we kind of like recommend a 4-step migration, and bear in mind that this is not a linear process. It is very much an iterative, circular approach. So start off by assessing what exists. So understanding the current states in detail. So that's usage, models, reports, any other things that you might have going on. From that, we can develop a plan, prioritize which objects get migrated first. We can then execute that migration in waves and address any technical challenges that might come up. And then finally, we can validate and educate validate the fact that the migration is successful, and to back up the successful migration, educate people how to use things properly. So we can ensure performance expectations are met. We can just train users in how to adopt a new platform, and by also bolstering all of that with really strong governance. And that's just something we can talk about later, but governance is going to be key to how any migration is successful, but also how we start introducing any of these new features as well.
So you're saying it's not wait until your data's lapsed, realize it's expired, panic, and click some buttons. Okay, cool.
Correct.
Good to know.
Yeah. Although that is quite fun sometimes if you like high adrenaline, high octane environments. In terms of how that then looks like, so Data Chouette did a great webinar on the actual technical migrations. They went into a lot of depth about how to migrate objects. And this is a very simplified process flow that was presented. So I've got a QR code up there, so go watch it. It's very informative. And because it is French, you can learn some French in watching it too. But effectively, we can assess, we do the assessment, plan and prioritize, and then we've got some questions to ask. Are the objects is the capacity that we're on the same capacity that we're migrating to? Yes, makes migration really easy. Plus all the other considerations that we've got to go through as well. If it's in a different region, then we've got other questions to ask. Are we only migrating Power BI items? Yes. Are we using large semantic models? No, we're not. Migrate really easy. But if we are, if we do have non-Power BI items that we need to migrate, or if we do need to migrate large semantic models, we need to do a lot of technical changes to make sure that a migration is then successful. And this is just a technical migration, so not taking into consideration any of the performance improvements you might want to undertake or any of the new features you might want to unlock. This is just like-for-like migration. But how can we help? So we currently have an offer that assesses your landscape and creates a plan for migration, as well as helping spot any gotchas that might trip you up. It is free for a lot of customers, so go download the flyer via the QR code for more information, or do get in touch with us to find out how we can help you prepare for your migration and beyond. And that's the sales pitch over. That's the context set. Let's turn it over to questions.
All right, grand. Let me get rid of that. There we go. Cool. Okay, so bunch of questions. Thank you everyone who is putting in questions. Obviously, feel free to slam more questions in over the next half hour or so as we kind of run through a load of this stuff. But yeah, let's just kind of start picking a three. So number one on our list that was before we'd even gone live, which is impressive.
Oh no.
With the upcoming, well, no, not at all. With the coming changes to the Fabric licenses on the 1st of July, anything we need to do now to avoid any issues? And I think you've covered like some of those in terms of the technical approach and how you guys doing it. But yeah, anything more you'd add in terms of that stuff?
Yeah, so I guess what are we? We are 5-6 weeks away from the 1st of July. really that means that we need to start planning. We need to start making those movements. So if you haven't done so already, spin up the grace period fabric trial, which you will be migrating to, and start planning how you're going to do that. Start assessing how your objects are going to be moved, and then start moving through it. But I think that's more a repeat of what I just said.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And it's mainly down to when your current P capacity is expiring, and so it won't necessarily be bang on the 30th. It is when you're happen to be expiring, you should be planning your migration around. So you should have an end date in mind that has been communicated to you by Microsoft. And if you haven't had that and you haven't seen that and you are blissfully, happily chugging along on a P SKU, you probably want to go and check.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Other best question that I know is right up your technical governance alley. More to do with looking at capacity usage. Mm-hmm. So when we're having a look at Fabric, so you're moving away from your PSQs, moving into Fabric, you've got the capacity metrics app. Like what else would you be looking at? And I know kind of we've been having fun with APIs and scraping data and making data about your data, but I'll let you explain away.
Yep. So there's quite a lot of different ways to kind of cut this. A useful free tool is abbreviated as FUAM, or the Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring. It's part of the Fabric Toolbox. You'll find it either through Guy in the Cube or through GitHub. Should have had these links for pairs, but we'll send out a follow-up afterwards. So you've got the links to these things. What that does is it will scrape the different the Fabric endpoints and provide you with rich details of what's happening, who's using what's being deployed, and then the other bits so we have created a tool which we call Spectate, which does some of what FUAM does other bits differently. So this is using more the Power BI APIs to scrape all that metadata and usage and lineage logs and store that for beyond the 30 days that you're given access to. So you can see usage over a lot longer period of time. That's another approach. So there's the capacity metrics app, there's the FUAM, and then there's custom bits that we and others have probably built as well.
Just to double check, it is the Fabric Unified Admin Monitoring as part of Fabric Toolbox. We'll pop a link in the chat so people have access to that if they want to go and install it. So I guess there's two different aspects for that. So kind of when we're talking, a lot of our clients are talking about data products. Data products is the cool thing to talk about as of last year. And obviously from Gartner this week, it's all changed, but that's fine. People tend to look at usage. So I've put this semantic model together. Like, how are people engaging with it? How are people actually coming back and using it? Am I getting value from the thing that I've built? So building something custom that goes from there and wherever you're doing your data engineering and pulling it together so you have a holistic view of usage across the life cycle of a particular data pipeline. That's why we go and build our own thing and go, well, we can just scrape the APIs and pull it together and build our own data model. So actually we can pull together different sources. If it's purely capacity usage, if it's like a look at my workspace, how close am I coming? What does the smoothing look like? All of that good stuff. Then yeah, just use the out of the box one, go to the Fabric Toolbox and get that. So it depends what you're trying to do. Do you go custom because you're trying to make a data set and plug a load of either other stuff into it? Or do you go, someone solve that problem, click a button, and then start scraping it? Either way, I would have that as a data set that you look after and maintain rather than, assuming that 30 days worth of history is enough for you. It's not always.
Not always.
Cool. Okay, I mean, going down the list. So there's one quick one I'm going to jump to. Hi, Nick. Oh, hey, Nick. Would you agree that a fabric capacity with tenant settings users can create fabric items switched off is pretty much Power BI premium? Now, I know a load of incredibly pedantic people on the Fabricat team are going to be screaming at this, but yeah, go, East. What do you reckon?
I mean, in effect, yes. I mean, there are caveats. You do miss out on a load of things by turning that feature off. But again, it comes back to governance. Like if you and your organization aren't ready for that or you don't want it, hold off for now until the governance around it is there. Because like we saw with rollout of Power BI a long time ago, was that, hey, self-service, let's go open the gates. And everyone did, and everyone's now complaining about an uncontrollable data landscape. We do the same thing with Fabric, or the additional Fabric objects that we have. Then you're going to be in a similar position, but on a much bigger scale. So in short, yes, it is pretty much the same, but I also wouldn't say keep it off forever, because you are turning off additional features. You've also got to think about like who your personas are. If you already have a data platform like that's on Databricks and using Power BI, keep that. But if you want to then enable other personas, maybe like a citizen data engineer, Fabric might be an alternative for that use. So think about what you want to do with it before just cutting it off.
I would also say you've also got a minor uplift in the things you can do just with a Power BI, which is why we mentioned that on that slide earlier, going, you may also want to use Direct Lake for some things. There's features inside just the pure Power BI thing that won't be impacted by that setting, which is going to change by moving over to a Fabric capacity. So you can treat it exactly the same, but there will be additional consideration. You can go, oh, but we can also now do that. Even if you've got that user can create Fabric items switched off, you can still use Direct Lake. And you'd be missing out if you didn't switch and start using things like direct agents just to find another way to leverage the semantic models that you've bothered building. So it's a way up, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Alrighty, cracking on with the list. There's one that I don't know the answer to. I'm assuming it's a no, but we'll try. We'll be upfront if I don't know the answer to things. I don't know if you know the answer. Are Gen 1 data flows being deprecated? I've not seen any official announcement about it.
Yeah, I've not seen any official announcements either, but my expectation would be at some point they would be. It's like with most things, not even just Microsoft, but any technology company, if they release a new version, likely it is that the older versions at some point will be deprecated. So if you've got any Gen 1 data flows now, then start thinking about how you migrate those to Gen 2 or to something else.
And having a dig around, I found lots of advice about how to switch it over and that you should consider trying it over. I didn't find anything saying you should absolutely move it now because we're about to turn it off. Not saying it might get turned off, but yeah, don't know officially. We can find out officially. I don't know. Another one, which is actually bizarrely timely, because I was having a conversation with a client about 45 minutes ago, which is how are you dealing with Synapse pipelines moving to Data Factory? So this is outside the remit of what we want to talk today in terms of premium moving to Fabric. So we won't spend a lot of time on this. But yeah, if you're looking to move to Fabric and you've got a load of data flows, mapping data flows specifically inside of Synapse, how does that migrate easily? I've seen a migration wizard. I've not seen a migration wizard that works effectively and that works at scale and will do things on horrendously complicated mapping data flows. And the only ones I've come across tend to be horrendously complicated. So currently it's a bit of you kind of need to rebuild it. But again, that is based on some cursory digging about an hour ago. We've not had to do it at massive scale. But I just want to address the question rather than entirely ignore it. But there isn't really a straightforward answer at the moment that I've seen. There may well be out in the world, but we've not built it. Anyway, back onto Power BI things. Okay, more around Direct Lake. So if you are doing that semantic model move over, so you've got existing stuff, you've ticked the button, you're now on an FSQ, not a PSQ. Any constraints in moving to Direct Lake? Anything that won't work in Direct Lake that would have previously, as to why you couldn't switch over and use it?
Yeah. So with things like Direct Lake enables, the engine's going to try and use Direct Lake first, and if it can't, it's going to default to, I think, Direct Query.
Direct query.
So I wouldn't say there's like constraints per se, but there are. It's more like limitations rather than constraints. And Microsoft has like Microsoft very good at keeping the documentation up to date. So I'm not going to go through all of them because it would take too long, and you can go read the documentation yourself. But like RLS stuff is a consideration or a limitation when you're using the SQL endpoint within Fabric. It will, like RLS is a bit behaves strangely sometimes, but again,
I guess context, if people haven't seen too much about Direct Lake, is there's two forms of Direct Lake. There's Direct Lake directly against one lake, and essentially this is going to everything in one lake, everything you're storing as a lakehouse artifact, a warehouse artifact, as whatever it happens to be, that's going to be stored in that table format known as Delta. Essentially Parquet files in a lake with a transaction log on top of it. Direct Lake, if you're using Direct Lake on top of one lake, that is just directly running the Vertipack against those Parquet files. So it's nice, super quick, loads of benefits. You can also use Direct Lake against one of the SQL endpoints. That's one of the SQL endpoints that comes with a Fabric object. So if you have a warehouse, so you've got a SQL warehouse inside Fabric, you can have a semantic model that uses Direct Lake on top of that. And so it's still going to circumvent and work out and go to the Parquet files underneath, but it can fall back to use the SQL endpoint on there. And there's different limitations depending on which one of those you're using. So I think if you've got things like row-level security, which you'd have in your warehouse, you wouldn't necessarily have that on the Delta table directly. That's a limitation. Things like views, I don't think you can do Direct Lake on top of a view. There's
Correct.
absolute things that you can't do. Composite models, you can't say that bit's Direct Lake, that bit's import, like we would with a mix of import and direct query. There are absolutely limitations, but there's a long list of it that we can share in the details. And it's in this version that'll work, in that version that won't work. In that version it'll fall back to direct query, which will be slower. In that version it won't. So absolutely, it's worth kind of whipping through that list and just using it as a checklist, going, I'm not using that, I'm not using that, I'm not using that. Oh, I am using that. Oh, that's going to hit it. And some of them are a little bit nuanced. So it's worth actually just whipping through that list. But the webinar elves, I'll share that in the chat in a second. Cool. Hopefully that helps clear those bits up. Let's go on. Okay, right. Any of that to do with actual Power BI. So what are the technical complications of migrating semantic models? What are the gotchas?
So I'm assuming, I guess we got to decouple like normal semantic model versus a large semantic model. So a gotcha with a normal semantic model is going to be around like how you've designed and implemented your semantic model. So are you conforming to best practice or not? Do you have a load of calculated columns that are doing things which they maybe shouldn't, and they should be pushed back into the data layer? In general, if things do conform to best practice, the technical considerations are minimal. Like if it performs nicely, or in theory should perform nicely, it will perform nicely on Fabric. Where you have like the large semantic models are a different beast because of the storage which sits underneath them. So there's that storage decoupling that needs to happen. So the migration itself there's more steps involved rather than just swapping the workspace over. I'm just trying to goes into details in the Data Chouette webinar. So go and watch that. There's the more detailed workflow that goes into the technical steps of what you need to follow. But it's more additional steps rather than, hang on, I need to do weird and wonderful stuff. I need to remodel my model in order for it to form. It's more, I need to decouple my storage and shift my storage around to also then migrate it.
There's a couple of questions, a couple of people being slightly naughty and asking for detailed questions around Databricks versus Fabric. That's not what we're here to talk about today, so I'm going to skip right over those questions. We are trying to focus on what are the considerations of premium to Fabric use. That is a whole other, at least an hour's worth conversation if you want to go into platform considerations. So, not ignoring you, just not talking about it. Another one from Nick in terms of the looking at the usage monitoring, or even how we've gone and done it. Could you run that from another tool such as Databricks or Fabric? Essentially, if you're looking at Fabric monitoring and kind of capacity usage, do you have to do that monitoring from within Fabric itself? Now, I know when we've built things, we're just using the API. You can run that from anywhere that can access the API. Not as familiar with FOAM. So would you have that as part of Fabric, or does it not really matter?
So FOAM does use Fabric objects, so uses the pipelines and notebooks to create the assets in which it needs. So we'll also use OneLake to store the data. So for FOAM, you do definitely need to have Fabric. You could dig into it, take out the APIs, replicate the functionality elsewhere, whether it's Databricks or somewhere else. So that is possible. With our custom tool, we have it running into Databricks because it also then uses data from Databricks, then surfaces it back up into Power BI. So you've got this little circular reference going on.
Makes sense. So you can report on the fact that you've been reporting on your reporting and you've got data about your data. Yeah, way it should be. Cool. Okay. One interesting one, which I don't actually know. Power BI usage data. So you're looking at activities, report usage, all that kind of stuff. What does that look like once you've migrated? So you've got an existing capacity with semantic models, dashboards, and things. You go through the process, you switch it over. It's now an FSQ. Like, are you starting again? Is that a new capacity and it's disjointed, or can you see it kind of clearly across the two?
That's a great question, and I don't know. Is the answer? The report usage within Power BI has been an interesting one that has evolved significantly in the last few months, and that's really because of Fabric. Prior to that, you'd just get high level and it'd be very basic, and now we've got richness. Whether Microsoft will still use the same aggregations, I don't know. But by using like a custom tool, you're able to preserve that high level lineage. I mean, you'll still be able to draw down into different objects and workspaces because they will preserve their IDs. What we're doing is just changing the capacity that sits behind it. So in theory, it should be able to preserve across, but I don't know for certain.
And certainly, if you're building your own monitoring, you can just stitch it together. So that's another thing for you should probably augment the monitoring that's out of the box with your own, so you can do things in case there's any gaps. It's fair. Okay, a couple more ones in here. It's an interesting one. It's a hairy topic. Data mesh in Fabric, multiple workspaces. Now, certainly there's some things they put into Fabric specifically around this. Now, obviously, semantics and naming is incredibly confusing because mesh is very similar to the idea of data fabric, and obviously this is called Fabric, but it's actually technically doing some things that are more like a mesh, and it's very, So what they did is they put in this concept called domains. So the idea of data mesh should be independence of infrastructure stack for each data product that's being stood up. You shouldn't be having to go and knock on someone's door from central infra and ask them for some capacity in order to do your job. So in that case, you'd have to be talking about multiple workspaces because you assume you'd be using separate capacities. Now, that's if you're being a very purist about a mesh and saying, well, there's no way that person doing lots of work should ever impact the availability of that data product because they should be independent pieces. But if you're going to pay for a capacity for every single different data product you're going to stand up, you're going to end up spending a lot of money and essentially having lots of capacities you're not using to its full extent. So it depends on how purist and pragmatic you're being in terms of approaching a mesh architecture. Realistically, we'll tend to see, multiple workspaces, but maybe sharing capacity. Certainly use the concept of domains. So you can say, well, actually, these different objects, these separate workspaces are all linked to do with this domain. These different objects to do with this domain. That is them trying to put this sense of ownership and collating different objects together into a sense of domain-based ownership, which is one of the core tenets of Mesh. That is how you think about that. But when it comes to infra and pricing, essentially what capacity you're paying for, it's more nuanced because it tends to be how much money do you have.
Yeah, there's also like more practical things like beyond like data mesh. So if you're going down like my platform is only Fabric, then it's like separating your engineering workloads from your BI workloads as separate SKUs, as separate workspaces, isolates things like noisy neighbors, so the two aren't interfering with the other. But again, that comes down to what is your intention with all these things. Instead of just going, I'm just going to slap it all on one, or I'm just going to have specific things for others. Actually, just think about what you're trying to achieve, and that will then inform how you design the different capacities and workspaces and domains that you then employ.
And that I think is the last of kind of the main questions on topic that we've got. There's a couple of follow-ups, in which case kind of there's a few links and things that we can poke. I know people have asked for further details and stuff. We can happily put some more links down in the chat. One thing we did have a question, if we can get the offer back up. So that last slide you had, I can just ping that back up in case there's anyone who missed it at the start in terms of actually how you go about navigating this journey and making it a little bit easier. We do still have a couple of minutes if there's anyone who wants to sneak in a last and final question. But otherwise, unless there's anything that kind of comes in last minute, East, any final words of consideration, any kind of things people should look at, think about as they embark on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, don't get scared by it. I think with most migrations, I think the word migration just puts people off. So don't get scared. If you want to just trial things out, now is the time to make sure that you're moving in the right direction and you're tackling things as they come about, rather than a last minute panic. But also, like, you can just pick up the phone, send us an email. We're more than happy to help out. There is our offer on, which will kind of do the assessment and planning for you. And then we can also help out with the technical migration as well.
Alrighty, very, very good. In which case, we will wrap it up there. And as I guess, kind of as the final thing, in saying, don't think about it as a technical migration. Migrations never work if you just blindly go, what we had before, we're going to push a button, and then what we got afterwards is the way it should be. As always, take a look and go, is there anything we can do better now? Anything actually we should be taking advantage of? Any extra stuff we can achieve because we're doing this? And then while you're doing migrating, as you're kind of getting everything lined up, if there's anything you can just fix on the way rather than just carrying it as, oh, we'll do that later. It's always better to think about that in advance, right?
Exactly. Don't take technical debt with you.
Cool. In which case, we're going to close it there. So thanks everyone for coming along. Thanks everyone for taking part. Massive thanks for all the questions. And thank you, East, for helping us on this journey.
Well, thank you all very much. See you soon.